Welcome back to the Trading Apologist. My name is Tom, and today is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2025. And today, markets actually held up quite strong. We've been expecting a bit of a pullback with the 4-hour charts overheated. Daily timeframes have room to run, and we did not see that today. There was a little pullback in the morning, and then markets stabilized and kind of just steadily ground higher throughout the day. And we're seeing very orderly sideways consolidation right now. And that is right under 6,900 resistance for the S&P 500, which we'll look at in a moment. But if we don't see a pullback and we just see orderly consolidation to reset the smaller time frames, that often leads to a more bullish and aggressive breakout. So that is something we need to keep on our radar as we look at the charts today. And historically, if we go back to 1950, the S&P 500 has bottomed for the month of December between the 1st and the 5th, nearly 42% of the time. So Decembers often have early weakness or a lot of chop, followed by more bullish price action in the latter half around the holidays and the new year. So that's something we're anticipating, not just because we blindly follow history, because it's what the charts are saying. The charts are saying we've been in a downtrend in a lot of risk assets for the last 6 weeks. The daily timeframes are oversold, are due for a bounce. We saw some of that last week, but that made the 4-hour and especially the smaller timeframes move up too quickly, so they need a moment to reset. So is that going to be this sideways consolidation that we're seeing right now? Are we going to get more of a pullback for better entries? We will discuss that as we look at the charts today. And today was an active trading day for me. I got in a lot of positions, and I don't have much time today, so I'm going to focus on the main indices. Obviously, Tesla and Bitcoin, because we have to cover those all the time. We love our Tesla and we love our Bitcoin. But outside of that, I'm going to focus on the trades I got into and why. So let's get right into the charts. This isn't financial advice. Past results are not indicative of future performance. Do your own research. Hey, me again. Before we get into the charts, I forgot to mention this in the intro. A few of you on YouTube were requesting that I extend that 50% discount Black Friday code for Patreon. So I did that. I extended it through Friday. If you go to patreon.com/tradingapologist, or the link is in the description, put in TABF and then the number 2. So I'll put the text on screen here, and that will give you 50% off of your first month, so you can check it out. And you can always do the 7-day free trial and do the 50%. So you're getting 6 weeks, and you can cancel after that first free week too if you really don't like being around me that much and getting my emails in your inbox with trade alerts and other market things of that nature. But we'd love to see you in there. We have a weekly call for the highest tier every Sunday afternoon or Monday morning before the market opens, and it's a nice tight-knit group. Anyway, let's get into it. All right, starting here on the S&P 500, and you can see that very orderly consolidation that we have seen really for the last couple of days, actually since Friday, in this range between 6,800 and that resistance overhead at, well, 6,870. I was going to say 6,900, but really it's at 6,870, and I think we can move this line up a little bit now because I was drawing it off of this pivot high from the 5th of November. But since we've gotten these clean rejections here at 6,865, and we had this other swing high, and this was our gap up open, that seems like a better line to watch. So we just improved our charting together. Yay. But let's see what the 4-hour is doing. And in terms of the 4-hour, we had hit over 70 on the RSI. Obviously, the 4-hour can get more overheated, but we broke this downtrend. We hit 70. We haven't back tested this line for support yet. We are testing this line for support on the NASDAQ, which we'll look at in a minute, but the 4-hour still has room to reset here. Just for contrast, the daily time frame, we still have tons of room to run for RSI and mean reversion. And then if we go to the smaller time frames, I'm really looking at the 1-hour, and often you can look at 1-hour oversold conditions to mark a daily higher low. We didn't quite hit 30, but we did come down a fair bit here on the 1 hour. Now we hit the top of the range again. I'm looking for a mean reversion dot on the 1 hour to give me confidence to enter. I can speak. But let's look over at the NASDAQ here in contrast. All right. And on the NASDAQ, we were actually a little bit stronger today. So we have a similar consolidation range, and I don't have it drawn out quite the same. This was our range right here. And we broke higher on the NASDAQ above that 25,550. And now have been consolidating above that, are pushing up higher in the after hours. And the NASDAQ has our mean reversion dots on the 4 hour. We touched 70. We're still pushing higher, but you can see how this was our 4 hour resistance in the downtrend. We have horizontal resistance. Now we've been finding support on that, and we got to extend it out a little bit for the NASDAQ to see if that's going to continue to hold. And if this is going to break down, that would have us set our, hopefully, higher low here on the daily sense. Now on the 4 hour, anything above 25,250 is going to be a higher low. But if we break that, then we would be looking for a daily higher low, and the next support is that even 25,000 for the NASDAQ. So that broadening rally that was leading more into the S&P 500 today moved back into tech a bit more. And if we do pivot over to the 1 hour time frame here, and you can ignore this line, we do have mean reversion dots to the upside. But if we go out to the daily is bouncing and has plenty of room to run to the upside here for the NASDAQ. All right, looking to SMH with that strength in tech today, with the NASDAQ outperforming, semiconductors performed well also. But on the 4 hour now, we are into confluence model cloud resistance here at the top of the band. And we have 7 bars up in one direction. And if you follow Gann swing analysis, you know anything over 7 bars in one swing direction has a higher chance of correcting. Now, we saw that 7 bars up last week, and then we just ground around sideways for a bit. Now we're into more overhead resistance and these previous swing highs. So if we are going to see a correction, this is about the point where I would expect that. We have a similar RSI breakout here on the 4 hour with that horizontal line, similar to the NASDAQ, where we're finding support. And if we look at the small time frames, just in contrast, you can see that we're in the 1 hour upper band. And the lead for me that this is coming to an end is going to be a breakdown here. We've had those 2 swings now in the upper band. The question is this going to be it? Are we going to break down, or is it going to take another swing higher? And then we can look for this to find support, at that center band. Maybe we even back test this breakout zone right here on this downtrend. So we'll take it one day at a time, but this is definitely looking a bit more overheated. And for continuation later in the month, I would love to see this cool off a little bit. And just like our other charts, this has plenty of room to run on the daily time frame. All right, let's start with the obligatory charts, Tesla, and then we'll get into Bitcoin, and then I'll get into the individual trades. So Tesla, unfortunately, is doing a whole lot of nothing. We're in the middle of the 4 hour center band. We kind of broke out from this RSI downtrend and have been grinding on top of it. We have mean reversion dots to the overside, so that's suggesting maybe we could see a bit of a cool off. But that indecision and volatility expanding is represented by this megaphone pattern that we find ourselves in on the 4 hour, which is just telling you that the market doesn't know which way it wants to go, but volatility is increasing. So once this breaks, that will give us more of a direction. If we are looking to the daily time frame, the daily is still firmly between this daily RSI downtrend, and then it had this uptrend that we broke down from, and we're right in the middle of this, not knowing if we're going to break up above this now resistance or break down below this RSI support represented by that megaphone pattern. And we do have resistance overhead at that 440 level and the confluence model center cloud, which is steadily rising. So by the time we intersect that, that might be closer to 445 or something like that. So Tesla, I would love for it to give us some clarity. I suppose the one thing we could say on the 4 hour to have us leaning slightly bullish just in terms of price structure, we did, even though this was just a wick, we made a higher high, then we made a lower low, but now we've made a higher high again, and presumably a higher low if this doesn't break down. So we have some semblance of potentially bullish price structure coming in just from these swings, but they've been quite erratic. But that's always the case with Tesla because it's so driven by sentiment, by the options action, and other things. Sorry, I'm just turning my phone on silent so it stops vibrating next to the microphone. Let's move on. Okay, Bitcoin, after its breakdown, saw a very strong bounce. I'm just starting here on the daily, and let's bring in the Confluence Model Clouds. I know it makes the chart busier, but they give us a good sense of where we are just within the narrative. And we broke this RSI downtrend to the upside. Looks like we are turning around there. We have our Confluence Model center band coming in overhead. We'll probably intersect that, somewhere around 95. But right now we're getting to a point of decision because we have this downtrending resistance and we have this little overhead resistance that I thought was giving us an ascending triangle or maybe some kind of ugly inverse head and shoulders, but we'll look at that on the 4 hour in a second. So we're just getting into resistance, but we had a very strong reversal day. So let's look at that on the 4 hour. And if we're looking at this on the 4 hour, right as we're getting into overhead resistance, we are into the Confluence Model center band, but it is coming in at a steeper clip. So whenever this Confluence Model comes down at a steeper clip, it's a little harder to break through. We're attempting to do that right now. And we have this overhead resistance, which would give us right now our third time retest of this. If I was a betting man, and sometimes I like to bet, I would say we are most likely going to get a rejection here at this just under 93K. And then we would come back down, and I would hope that this line that has plagued us that I want to hold above at that 89,000, if we pull back that far, that would give us support. And then we would attempt a fourth time breakout, and we would be in a much better position there overall. With how these Confluence Model bands would then be in more of a neutral position to then allow us to perhaps try to get back into an uptrend. So let's see what tomorrow brings. This was a really strong reversal off these lows. You know, we kind of have deviated from this trend line twice, which I don't love in terms of the overall strength of the structure, but that was a very encouraging sign to see that V-shaped recovery for Bitcoin. All right, and before we get into Solana, I just want to look at MicroStrategy since it's Bitcoin adjacent, and MicroStrategy as well, and this is a messy chart, but this downtrending resistance, we just broke through this. So it's front running Bitcoin a little bit, and we've been in this downtrend since the 27th of October. Just broke through, got into the Confluence Model center band on the 4 hour, and had that massive volume candle that we talked about yesterday on the daily, probably, within the top 5% or maybe top 2% of volume candles of this entire bull run. And we had that hammer. And actually now I'm just seeing that we're getting a buy signal on the daily on the Confluence model, which you do not actually see often. We have to see if this confirms on the daily candle. Which daily candle is this? This is for Tuesday. Oh, it's today's candle. It confirmed on today's candle. That's actually a great sign because I have this set to neutral, and getting a green candle on the daily, we have not, in the neutral sense, God, we have never gotten that for MicroStrategy on neutral. That's impressive that we have not gotten one of those on the neutral setting. Last time was here in January of 04. That was a different company back then. Anyway, that's something. Okay, I'm just rambling now. Let's move on to the next chart, but good sign. And I am in calls now on MicroStrategy expiring in March of 2026 to play this bounce. It's risky, but it seems like it could easily get up to that 230 level. So yeah, let's see what MicroStrategy can do. All right, Solana. I just got out of my first perp trade since the 10th. So since crypto had that big breakdown on 10/10, I have not been in a perp trade. And I just got in on this pullback because, as I said on Friday, with this resistance, it looked like we were shaping up a reversal pattern of an inverse head and shoulders. And my theory was this is either a higher low or I'm wrong. So easy to set a stop just below these lows when you're getting down to this point. So I got in at about 124. Rode this up to the almost 140 level it got up to 122%. I think I closed out at like 112, 113%. So not bad for a one-day trade. I'm waiting for this to reset now because the 4-hour and the daily have more room to go, but the smaller time frames are into a bunch of resistance on Solana. So I'm looking for a pullback to 135, maybe all the way down to 132. Let's see what the 50% of this range is. And sorry, I'm talking about the very small time frames. That's probably not why you're here. 50% would be at that 132. Okay, so yeah, maybe I'll set some limit entries there as I head to bed tonight. But Solana, Bitcoin, all very oversold. So if we're assessing these on the larger time frames, a breakout is going to get us to let's just say that 170 level, this previous pivot high. And that seems to make sense with how much more room we have to run on the 4-hour. So I'm looking for that move if we can break above the 144 resistance for Solana. And then next resistance overhead would be 177 to 180, and then the 200 to 205 after that. So let's just take it one step at a time. But the daily clearly has a ton of room to run, and breaking these other downtrending overhead resistance levels, tackling these one at a time will, be a good sign to see bit by bit. But then the 200-day moving average is right around that 177, 180, which has been really one of the most challenging zones for Solana this entire recovery since April. You can see how all that price action really consolidated around that zone. All right, let's talk about the trades. So first one is LAES, which is a Swiss semiconductor play. And we obviously had a large sell-off since we traded this back in, was it September or October? Somewhere in this uptrend we were trading it. But it bounced off the 200-day moving average, has really corrected aggressively, but got back into the Confluence Model Center Cloud on Friday and pulled back today and back tested this for support. So I got into a little position, just shares. It seems like we have a bit of an inverse head and shoulders potentially forming here. So that's the other part I'm counting on. And if that breaks to the upside, that will give us our price target. And if we just map that out and take it to, we have to put this where it's actually going to break out. We do have the 50% coming in to watch, and the 382 overhead is a bit of resistance. I'm more worried about the 50% at 550. But potentially, this is saying I had it drawn a little bit differently yesterday. I think this is probably the better way to draw it with this uptrend. Would have us into this volume cluster here at about $6 and all these previous lows. So yeah, small little swing position, just straight shares on this one. Okay, the other one I added to today was ALAB, which we talked about yesterday, where we had this fourth time breakout. And I got in when we pulled back to test this trend line before the market closed with just 20% of my position. I'm glad I waited because we bounced up to the next fib level, to the 618. And then news came out of, I think, Oracle and AMD partnering, and that might impact some of the sales. And there was an aggressive fear-based sell-off, but it did find support right where you would expect support to come in at this trend line at the Confluence Model Center Cloud on the 4-hour. We had some mean reversion dots that were foreshadowing this, so I always hate breakout plays for that because breakout plays often do have these mean reversion dots. Now we have this volume climax, which we have to watch because that can sometimes mark a turnaround point. And if we break much below 140, I would get out of the position. But if we're looking at the 1-hour, and let's just assume on the daily, we're recovering, and this might be our higher low on the daily. Daily higher lows, as I mentioned earlier, are often reset by 1-hour oversold conditions. So the 1-hour was oversold this afternoon, got our mean reversion dot, hit RSI, nice little bounce after hours, and we bounced off the Confluence Model Center Cloud here as well at that 142 level. So bringing all those things together tell us we should see some relief. And now the warning sign here is if we bounce up and we set a lower high because we broke this swing low, and then we break down and break this trend line and make a lower low, that would be your sign to get out of the trade. Really, the last line in the sand, I suppose, would be the low here at 131. But there is not a whole lot of support on this after this point all the way down to this previous consolidation zone. And actually, there's a gap fill here. at about $100 even, 100 to 102. So watch that. If this breaks down, get out of the trade and look to re-enter around that level, and that would be a great value zone for ALAB. All right, next one on the list is RGTI, which we were talking about yesterday. We pulled back a little bit today into support, and we are on the 4 hour still rejecting from the Confluence Model Center Cloud. And inverse head and shoulders is very much still in play right here. So I got into some calls. I got the, just looking at my list here, the 5/17/26, May 17th, 26, $30 calls. I can read, you guys. So that would be up here near this next volume cluster, which makes sense that we would probably find some resistance at that point. Honestly, I'm thinking if this is the bottom, it could bounce quite a bit more. And I usually look at these pullbacks and assume that a bounce after such oversold conditions is going to get to the 50%, which is right in this zone here. So even if we're conservative, $38 to $40 potentially. So got into this one on RGTI, and then the strongest names, or the strongest name in my opinion, in the quantum space is QBTS. And I got into the $27 calls for April 17th, 2026. And this one is already back in the Confluence Model Center Cloud. It's holding up a little better than RGTI on the daily. You can see we have those same oversold conditions. And if we're just measuring out our fib values here to see where we could bounce, the 50% here would be at about $32, which is the bottom of this zone here. And you know, I don't even worry about this. I mean, granted, I'm at the $27 strike price, but I'm just trying to sell the contract before expiry. So I don't need this to hit my strike price. I just need price to move up and to be able to sell my call options for more than I bought them for. All right, the other one I got into today, which I'm looking at the weekly for some reason, is Coinbase, which also feels a bit risky right now. We are oversold in terms of mean reversion and RSI, but last time we were oversold, RSI ground around a bit and price drifted lower. This was that April period earlier this year. I guess here we just touched once and we moved higher and chopped sideways. So it's no guarantees that this is the bottom. And if we do break down, we have this gap here, and our next support isn't till about $212. So if we break these swing lows, and continue in the downtrend, not a great sign, and we're into the 200-day moving average. So this is riskier, but we are oversold, and I'm wondering if crypto maintains its strength, if this can catch up a little bit. It's not as strong as Robinhood, so that is something to note. But we've got a little mini inverse head and shoulders in play here with a target at 295, and you could argue, sorry for bumping the mic, that there is another larger head and shoulders shaping up in this neighborhood right here if we break above that neckline, which let's just measure it out for fun, depending on where. Oh, that would take us right to the point of control at 330. So yeah, makes a decent amount of sense as a price target. But I would say these lows here at 292 and the previous swing lows here at about that psychological $300 level, in that zone, we're going to find a lot of resistance. So yeah, right now this might be, you know, a higher low. We definitely have a higher high. The trend has flipped on the 4 hour. The daily is reset. So this has been weak. Crypto has been weak. It should recover, but we have a lot of resistance overhead. So small position for me, but still wanted to get in on Coinbase. All right, and last one I added to today a little bit to get my average cost basis down is Celsius. And we've been oversold on the daily. We have mean reversion dots. I still think there's honestly a chance we could hit this 33 level on another drop down, but it's trying. I started seeing just a little bit of positive price action in the charts. On the 4 hour, we got back into the Confluence Model Center Cloud, and we're just making little bits of progress. We broke this previous swing high here from November 20th with the high that we made on Monday. We've since pulled back, and as long as we hold above these lows at about $40 and continue this uptrend, things will look fairly constructive. I mean, you could really correct down and back test the 4 hour Confluence Model Center Cloud, and as long as we don't break this intervening low at 37, 38, it will still be okay. I am willing to deploy more into this, and I'm not in my full position size yet because I want it to prove it to me, and I'd be happy to add more if we get down to 33. So yeah, just holding this one a little bit longer for a recovery. All right, and you know what? Last one that I didn't get into a position on today, but I'm still holding is HIMS. And we talked about rejecting here at these previous lows at $40. We couldn't even get all the way there. And the healthcare space has been weak the last couple of days. We are now getting to an area where I would look at adding to my calls, but it's also close to a breakdown area. So we're testing the highs of this previous range. The Confluence Model Center Cloud is right here around that $35 price point. So I'll look at adding to my position a bit tomorrow. But if we break down, I quickly will need to make a decision if I'm going to get out of this or not, because HIMS has just been weak for a while. And it makes sense that we would get a little bit of relief bounce, but if it can't really do it here, I think it's better to just get out of the way and let things reset. And the fact that we got a mean reversion dot on the 4-hour and only recovered this little bit is just telling you how hard it is for this to gain positive momentum. And, we're seeing that subsequent selling, but let's see where we're at on the 1-hour. And you know what? We did get to oversold conditions on the 1-hour. So if the uptrend is going to maintain, we're bouncing off the center cloud. RSI is reset. We haven't gotten a mean reversion dot yet, but this is oversold on the 1-hour, which could mark that daily and the 4-hour higher low for us. Okay, so that is it for the charts. Watch the major indices tomorrow to see what those are doing. Is that strength going to continue? Are we going to keep chopping sideways? And in that instance, if you do want to get into a position, the safest play might be to wait for a breakout with volume confirmation to the upside to get in. If we see a pullback, you might get those better priced entries, which I'm hoping for because I still have a fair bit I would like to deploy. So let's see what tomorrow brings, and we will report on that in the Wednesday market. I don't have a name for these. The daily report. I don't know. Leave name ideas in the comments below because I have the weekly outlook and then the weekly wrap up. But for these daily videos, we need a title. Anyway, that's it. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.